Hi everyone, and welcome to another AND Network session. My name's Donna and I'm part of Succeed with Dyslexia. For those of you who are familiar with AND, we are the adult network and we explore all issues around neurodiversity and dyslexia. So as you might know, that's our passion most definitely here at Succeed with Dyslexia. And I'm just going to introduce the other members of the network. We've also got an additional guest from the Adult Dyslexia Centre this evening, which is Katrina Cochrane. Hi, Katrina.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Because we know this is a really interesting session tonight, isn't it, where we're exploring around dysgraphia. So it's great to have you with us. But I guess, you know, our listeners this evening will be very familiar that normally the person who represents part of the coalition from the Adult Dyslexia Centre is Sue Floor. Hi, Sue. Sue, you're on mute.
Sorry.
That's okay. I did it the other day, Sue. I was talking for quite a while before somebody told me I was on mute.
I've lost my voice anyway. So anyway, I'm the manager at the Adult Dyslexia Centre, and yeah, I'm very pleased to be here this evening, listening to Una, see what she's going to tell us for our adults. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. And, you know, for those listening tonight, we've got the contact details, helplines and so on for the associations, haven't we, Sue? So thank you so much, Sue. Should be a really good session, this one. We're also joined then by Pat Payne, who's chair of the Yorkshire Rose Dyslexia Association. Hi, Pat.
Hi.
Would you like to share a little bit about what you guys do in Yorkshire?
Well, I think we try and cover most difficulties around neurodiversity other than dysgraphia. So I'm here to learn as well as, because I personally know very little about it. So it would be useful for me to be able to pass on this sort of information to other people. So I think it's a very lightly touched on subject.
Yeah.
So that's really what we do, try and help people wherever we can.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And as I say, we've got your helpline contact details that we share at the end, so thank you. And then I'm joined by the other part of the coalition, which is Hampshire Dyslexia Association, and here's the chair, it's Sue McKenna. Hi, Sue. Sue, you're also on mute.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Donna.
Sue. Hi. Would you like to tell us a bit about what Hampshire do?
Yes, if you're familiar with the map of the country, Hampshire is absolutely enormous and goes all the way down to the Isle of Wight. So we cover Southampton, Portsmouth, Southampton, the Hampshire, and the trustees of our charity try our best to support the community with a helpline, with meetings, and thinking about what you're going to talk about, Una. It's come back to me today. I worked at the University of Southampton for a long time, and I remember a family coming into a pre-visit before their son was starting at university. And I remember this family very well because they brought their dog with them. So I remember that. And Southampton is very good for aeronautical engineering. And this lad was doing an aeronautical degree and he had dysgraphia. And he was absolutely bowled over by the support that was going to be provided to him. I wish I could remember what the report said, Una, and why I remembered it was dysgraphia, but this lad went through his degree with a writer and all the support he needed. So I also, like Pat, know very little about what the current thinking is. So I'm interested to hear what you and Sue and Katrina have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. It's really interesting, isn't it? And we know here at Succeed, we get a lot of folks reaching out to us around dysgraphia. And Katrina, that's why it's great to have you with us as well tonight. You are a trustee at the Adult Dyslexia Centre. As I say, you're not normally with us as part of AND in this way. It's so great to have you. You are a specialist assessor. You're part of the accreditation board at the British Dyslexia Association. You're an author, a specialist teacher. You are the founder of Positive Dyslexia. And we wanted wanted to have your wisdom on this conversation around dysgraphia, just so that we make it nice and clear, you know, some of the differences that we know are happening in different parts of the world about assessment and so on. So I'd like to come to you and Sue after Una's presentation, if that's okay, just to, you know, get your thoughts on what happens in, for example, England and Wales around this difference. So that's going to bring me on then to Una and introducing her. We are so lucky to have Una Buckley with us this evening. I was so delighted when she agreed to present around dysgraphia. We work quite closely with Una here at Succeed with Dyslexia, and you are the founder, aren't you, Una, of Blossom for Life, which does many different specialist support strategies and assistance around the community with dyslexia and other differences as well. I saw a really fantastic set of photographs recently, and some of our listeners may have seen with you on social media. It was at the UCC conference, and let me get it right, it was the University College of Cork. Was that right, Una? Fantastic photographs of you with some of the other experts there. And I've heard a few times you giving radio interviews over in the Republic of Ireland as well. Not that I'm kind of keeping tabs on you, Una, but I am a fan.
Thank you. You're so kind, Donna, and it's always a pleasure to, you know, when we cross paths, it's always such a lovely conversation, and it's so great to, you know, meet so many new faces this evening, and all, you know, we're all on the path and the train together. So it's such a lovely gathering, and hope people can take away some, you know, practical tips and suggestions. The bar is set a little bit high, so I hope I don't disappoint anybody's expectations.
You will not disappoint us, do not worry. So Una, this is the tricky part that I get nervous about. Can you share your screen, please?
I can, of course, no problem. So hopefully everybody can see now. Great.
Lovely. So we will go quiet and I will hand over to you, Una. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining. Now, I can't actually see anybody, so you're taking up my full screen. So if I drop off or go blank, I won't actually know. I'll still be chatting away. So hopefully somebody will tell me at some stage if you can't hear
don't
anything.
Worry, Una, we won't let you escape. We will make sure that you don't drop out.
Perfect. Thank you. Everybody, welcome along. So delighted to be carrying out today's workshop on dysgraphia. I suppose as it's Dyslexia Awareness Month, for me personally, it's really important also to shed light to some of what I call kind of up and coming learning differences. So for me, dysgraphia and kind of dyscalculia are in that box in a sense, in terms of creating more awareness and creating more, you know, conversations and discussions around other learning differences. I myself am dyslexic and also have dysgraphia and had a later diagnosis with that. So for me, as it was mentioned at the start of today's workshop with Sue's story, I would have needed a great deal of help and assistance throughout my college and school exams. That was usually in the form of laptop assistance or through note-taking software, and lots of things I still am ingrained with now. So I think there's a lot of research still to be done on this area, and by no means today's workshop is, let's say, definitive, but hopefully there are some practical day-to-day things that we might be able to share with some people listening or at home, or even helping somebody with maybe some concerns in this area. So I'll kick in, and without further ado, I'll just give a very brief outline as to some elements of the work that we engage in. I'll do a little bit of an overview of dysgraphia. My main aspect really is practical suggestions. So when we do workshops or when we liaise with families or even organisations, it's about the kind of takeaways. You know, I'm not very much into lots of facts and just, you know, take everything away. Yes, it's really good to have solid information, but also they need to be practically applicable. And we'll also look at briefly a little bit of assistive technology, which we have tried and worked with many different organisations, and find some of these actually very, very impactful for students maybe with a diagnosis or an undiagnosis with dysgraphia. And then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up and some tips and suggestions and pieces that might help with moving forward. Just so a bit of an overview of what we do, and thank you, Donna, for the lovely introduction. We work with all ranges of learning differences, but also with all age groups. I find that is really, really important, because obviously if you have a learning difference, it doesn't stop when you finish formal education. You just take it with you, obviously, into the workplace and into whatever line of cohort you end up in. And we provide more of the ongoing help and the ongoing support. So let's say after you maybe get a formal assessment done, we get parents that are just, stranded, or an adult just doesn't know really what to do next and where do we go from here. So hopefully that's where we come in a little. And we also do an early intervention piece where maybe somebody doesn't have already a formal assessment and they're just kind of unsure of a roadmap or unsure of which maybe banner they should go under or how to move forward. I'm also, more importantly, a major advocate for the well-being and the holistic side of learning. So I myself have a background in a nutritionist, but I'm also really, really passionate about managing stress levels and mental health overlaps with learning differences. Probably 95 to 99% of students that we would work with would have some form of higher anxiety levels and threshold than might be present in other students. So it's really, really important that we integrate that into our day-to-day plans and into their overall well-being as well. So they not only can perform well in a school or in a workplace setting, but they can also maintain a very, hopefully, high quality standard of living. We then will do a range of, I mentioned some assessments, we do some camps. From an Irish base, we do a transition to secondary school programme, which I know might be a little bit different than in the UK. And just a range of overviews, an online course, and we have a parent and a teacher group as well. Thankfully, we've worked with many organisations to date, and we've been very fortunate to do a lot of work both here in Ireland and actually internationally, with the benefit or the disadvantages of COVID, with lots of online sessions like this. It's been very, very impactful for us to spread our remit a little bit more and try and impact some bit of information that we have learned or that we have worked on. Just as an overview, if anybody wants to put their email into the chat or even send us an email, we did construct a free guide. It's not only just for workplaces, for parents, teachers, students, anybody really that's looking to learn a little bit more and some practical takeaways. Some of the information as well from this evening is also in that booklet. So if anybody wanted to get access to that, that was a PDF guide that we drafted for Dyslexia Awareness Month this month, and we have some dysgraphia top tips as well in that booklet also. We also did an SWD article, so my integration there into SWD, which I know is on their website. So if people wanted to check that out afterwards, our main kind of takeaways from that were early diagnosis, multisensory, an OT, assistive tech, modified paper, and then implicit or quite detailed instructions. And I suppose to kind of tee us off mainly in terms of a fact base, this might be the best place really to start. So from our work, in this area, regardless of dysgraphia, dyslexia, or whatever label there might be presented to somebody that maybe is unsure of, we may have this, we may have that, it's always, I suppose, a good place to start wherever you're at now. So we get a lot of parents come to us and, they feel guilty, or there's a lot of, resentment as to, we maybe saw signs and they were 8 and 9 and we haven't really done anything about it. Is it too late? So it's never really too late, but if we're recognizing patterns and if there's ongoing trends, it's always good to maybe follow through on some of those as to, okay, well, yes, we've moved through some of the system, but how can we help now? So I'm very passionate about, okay, where we're at now, if there's still ongoing issues, how can we move forward? Multisensory approaches has been massively backed through scientific research for dyslexia, but also for a wide range of learning differences. And as we know, there may be overlaps, myself included, with somebody having dyslexia and dysgraphia, or having, multi-layers of learning differences, which can be beneficial to then incorporate a multisensory approach. So using, sight, so let's say looking at notes, hearing, audio, trying to do out mind maps, using a range of tools might be really useful. Then from an Irish base, I can't really speak about, I suppose, the major procedures in the UK at the moment. I know some of my fellow speakers tonight might address those, but in an Irish base, our main form of, through an assessment, let's say, or a formal diagnosis of dysgraphia is traditionally through an occupational therapy route or through the public healthcare system. So we would have, let's say, education psychologists that would formally diagnose dyslexia or other learning differences, but traditionally at the moment over here in Ireland, dysgraphia is diagnosed through an occupational therapy base. The assisted tech we'll get on to a little bit later, so I won't address that now. Similarly with modifying paper tools and instructions, we'll look at those in our further slides. So this lovely little mind map has a huge amount of information, so please feel free obviously to take a picture of it, or again, send us an email if you want us to send out some of the slides. We've no problem with doing that. There's an awful lot in here, so it will have a range of tips and suggestions. Can't take the full credit from it. I found it a few years ago and was like, that's an amazing outline, and haven't redrafted it myself, but I think it's split into really, really good categories. So we've organisation up the top side, fine motor, concentration, and then classroom management. So either as a teacher, but then also as a student, maybe in a classroom, what can be useful in that instance also, or at a meeting, you know, or at a workshop if you're in an educational or a corporate context. So some of our keyword vocabulary, checklists, beneficial or benefits from visual support, time to plan visually, mind maps and story mapping. I suppose in a classic instance of us looking at a mind map, it's really important to note that we have found through our element of research with our students that often there's specific ways, and everybody may be a little bit individualistic with drafting mind maps, but we find there's kind of a little bit of a sequence approach to a mind map. So kind of just throwing things in a bubble and just putting them all out without relating them to each other can often be quite difficult to memorize and retain in a longer term memory, but also a little bit challenging often to understand. So we do have some videos around that if anybody wants any further information as to kind of a mind mapping approach that we have found just personally in our organisation quite useful. Then from a fine motor basis, so we'll go on to a little bit on fine motor. We won't do it as detailed as an OT would do it. We'll do a little bit of an overview as to fine motor in a minute. But I suppose our main basis for possibly tendencies or signs of dysgraphia is also how we hold a pen or a pencil. So our pencil grip or, you know, holding a pen can often be quite challenging, and there can be an awful lot of work put into changing that, and that is definitely plausible and possible, but also there can be maybe easier methods to implement as well for a child or for a student or for an adult. The concentration then piece of often thinking things up, you know, on the spot, which again might have overlaps with dyslexia or learning differences, but more importantly, tires quickly when writing. So when we do our initial pieces, when we link in with a student or an adult during our assessment process, we would generally ask quite quickly, and we'll do a series of processes around this. But, you know, tiring quite quickly while handwriting is definitely, you know, I won't say a bit of a red flag, but definitely moving from an amber flag to a red flag. You know, if it's writing for a paragraph or two versus 2 or 3 pages, it is something to note there as to how difficult it is to keep writing. And we'll get on to the eligibility side in a few minutes as well. Then up the top left-hand side is instructions to be broken down, requires extra time. So if writing is still taking place, requiring extra time to do that may be a useful facility. And then the assistive technology, which can be vastly beneficial in my opinion. Something that I find quite useful to include, and we go through this in a bit more detail. We have an online program. It's called Dyslexic Secrets, but we look at dysgraphia also in it. And then this is a really important, I suppose, outline, as we often want to kind of go back before we go forward. And we would go through kind of a series of milestones with parents or with adults that we'd meet as to, you know, how are we with all of these things, walking, crawling, cycling a bike, because all of those early signs can be indications as to, okay, well, maybe something was, under the surface or wasn't maybe detected at that stage. We find here that the pincer grip or the pincer grasp, basically how we hold a pen or a pencil, is probably one of the most beneficial aspects of this whole slide, and obviously can be formed, at slightly different months and slightly different, obviously, parameters. But generally speaking, holding that and being able to hold it in a grasp format at that age can, be very, I suppose, intricative to indicating, okay, is this becoming, more of a problem, even regardless of handwriting, because that won't have been learned at that stage or alphabet formation, but actually just physically holding a pen or a pencil at that milestone might be, an indication of further challenges that may take place down the line. So possible signs, this is always an important one for maybe anybody tuning in that is unsure, and we all kind of jump ourselves into the bandwagon of times. If we listen to things like Feel Enough, we're like, I think I have that too. And that's really important to note and to watch, or we are great at often diagnosing everybody else, or no, but maybe this person has it. We do that in our initial assessment piece, where we'll do kind of a background history, and usually if one parent is there, they might say, no, I don't, but definitely my husband or my wife does. And we like to kind of point out other people's, maybe challenges as well. So it is important to note that people can have, and be misspelling words. They can have untidy handwriting. They can write for pages and get pains in their hands, so it's important to note that we can't just obviously put these into a box and say, okay, that's definitely they have dysgraphia. There's other underlying levels that, it's a kind of a sum of everything. So we need to have kind of a group of things that we are like, okay, well, these are all kind of correlated. That then may lead to another or further labeling process. Interesting, I don't do a lot in the research piece unless when I'm lecturing, but I just thought this was an interesting one to mention that there was a study conducted, and they provide an overview of handwriting development, and they emphasised on the complex nature of motor control processing that's required for handwriting. So like we're driving a car or operating, machinery or doing something, the motor control that's still evident and needed for handwriting actually is still quite large. If we can imagine, obviously we're trying to sit at a desk, or sometimes we're trying to write on the back of an uneven surface, the amount of control that we need in our hand and in our arm, in our shoulder, but also in our fingers, and we've tiny bones obviously in the top of our hand that will be impacted if we're constantly writing and putting pressure on areas that may have more of a weakness or more of an issue. But these authors categorized skilled handwriting in adults and then described how writing is acquired over a number of years in childhood. So handwriting involves a variety of developmental stages, some which we've looked at previously of fine motor skills, including a transition from production of characters as a series of discrete strokes, often separated by pauses or pen lifts. So as we're learning to maybe do the alphabet or handwriting books, as that's quite ingrained here in an Irish curriculum basis, in around maybe 5 to about 7, there'll be a huge amount of emphasis on going between the lines and getting those copybooks, where the student will practice and practice and practice. And they may have impeccable handwriting at that stage. And we would often see kids at that particular junction and there's no problems yet. That might be a kind of a masking element, and they may still have underlying issues. But sorry, I kept talking while leaving my place. So pen lifts to smoother, less variable and more automatic production under the control of learners and the motor representation. So basically all of that is saying is that it requires a very detailed skill. On our last slide, we're looking at more of a motor control, and often we really underestimate it. It is, yes, they are at an early stage in our curriculum, but after that, are people really spending a lot of time on handwriting and on motor control and on writing at a particular pace? We form a level of authenticity to our handwriting. Some will keep it neat, some won't keep it neat. Neat, again, will vary from person to person, what we think neat is. We'll have block, we'll have joint writing. As we get older, signing things can pretty much be a scribble for everybody. So we define and move through different stages of handwriting as well as we grow older, you know, and that changes and evolves as we move away from the traditional education system. So in a shorter version, some warning signs for dysgraphia of what we feel and also through research has outlined. So we look at the left side first. So I suppose, as we mentioned, kind of messy handwriting, yes, can be there, but there's a difference really, we feel, between messy handwriting and completely ineligible handwriting. So if it's, you know, very, very challenging to spot and very, very challenging to read, one of our key takeaways and signs would be, particularly in students that maybe have difficulties in this space, is they may really have a want to have really lovely handwriting. So for me, myself, I would have had like the first paragraph or two as neat as possible, looked really clear, was just starting off an essay. And then as I moved down the page, it would just drop off, and then it literally nearly turned into like a completely new language that I was making up, because I was just jumbling all the words together and everything was just being shoved onto a page. Then after illegible handwriting, saying words out loud while writing, trouble forming letters and letter patterns, and this can go back to obviously early education, but also even present in teenagers and in adults. Trouble keeping track of thoughts that if they've already written down. So like, what do I say next? What's my next word? And difficulty then with syntax, structure and grammar. Now, again, as we've mentioned, we can have overlaps with these with other elements of learning difficulties. So it's not that we just have dysgraphia if we have these difficulties, or we may have something else, or we may not have it, you know. So this isn't, let's say, a detection method. It's just some things to be aware of. Over then the right hand side, and something we found really interesting and through my own personal research, is that obviously it isn't always dyslexia if we have difficulties with spelling and grammar and punctuation. Yes, that can be a dyslexia red flag, but it's not always the case. Students that we would work with may have just dysgraphia, but may have that label and still have, you know, some common misconceptions or some common errors in spelling and in grammar punctuation. Poor organisation of written language, and then difficulties with fine or gross motor even movement that require handwriting. So to be moving at a consistent pace can require a huge amount of strain. We find this one interesting, and we would work with this with any age group really, actually more probably importantly over the last few years. We do this a lot with our teenage cohort who are wearing heavier bags and slouching over, and they're growing taller, so they may be a little bit more insecure in their own skin, and it's not as cool maybe to sit up straight anymore. I'm not too sure about what's cool or what's not cool for that age group, but we find that this can not, let's say, make the process be eradicated, but can make it a little bit easier. And we do a lot of work around the environment that's presented for a person that they are learning. So if they're at work, if they're at school, if they're at college, whatever they're doing, in order to understand and learn information, we often need the right set of tools and the right parameters to do that. So a posture aspect when handwriting is really, really vital. And from an Irish system basis, if somebody is going for an assessment or they're liaising with an occupational therapist in this dysgraphia space, they would do a lot of work on, okay, we're not even writing at the moment. How are we sitting with our feet on the floor? Where is our table? Where is our desk? Is it the chair the right height? And are we actually being able to sit over so that we can, you know, write on the page in a comfortable posture? As we know, with kind of younger kids, maybe they're sitting at a massively large or smaller dinner table and the chair is too big and they're sitting and they're, you know, sitting themselves at different angles, and that's not setting themselves up then to even be in a position to write properly, let's say, in the way that they would, let's say, need to do, especially if they were used to it in a different way in a school context. So we generally need to have our 2 feet on the floor. We do need to have some element of support behind us, because obviously if we've support behind us, that's taking less pressure then off our arm and the tops of our shoulder. And then we do want to have our arm rested on some form of a table or on some form of a book or something that needs to be there so that we're not putting the full force on the tops of our fingers. Now, they're looking in the middle there between the left and the right-hand side, so how you'd actually place that on a page. And then the pencil grip, as we looked at, vitally, vitally important. Very easy to detect how somebody holds a pen or a pencil, and if that is the position that they were taught, or if that's the position that's more comfortable for them. Interestingly, to unlearn that process is something I have yet to still master. Definitely is pliable, I think, from what I understand in this area. It can be done, but can take a huge amount of relearning and work. There are some items, I'm not sure if they're fully on the slides, but if anybody wanted any suggestions, we came across fabulous stationery kind of, let's say, group that we ship over, I think, from the States, and they help kids and even adults. We would give them to kind of relearn how to hold a pen or a pencil, and so prevents them from actually going back to their natural passion with it. So we would advise students, when they're taking that up, or adults, to do it for a few minutes at a time, take a break, and then kind of come in and out of it over time then, as we try and relearn basically how to hold a pen or a pencil, which sounds an awful lot easier than what it is. So then some essential tips. So I've split these 4 slides. We're going to look at home, school, college, and work, I think is the other one. Yes. I often like to look at 4 different parameters, because people coming at it from all different lenses. What applies at home and school and college and work may have overlaps, but may also be really different. So as we touched on briefly earlier, but it's just really important to emphasize adapting to the environment. So at home, really, really important to have that base where a student or a child or whatever age group they're at, that they have that kind of foundation level really to at least try and adapt or try and move through and maybe handwriting challenges or difficulties. Breaks between tasks or breaks between sections. We would work with lots of students that obviously, like most of them, want to fly through their homework as quickly as possible, often taking them actually quite a lot longer than what they would like. So I remember personally looking at homework and being like, gosh, that doesn't seem that long. Like, I'll be fine. And like 2 hours later, when I was 8 or 9, I could still be sitting there doing it, and I had a very good concentration span. So there was no getting up and walking around, and there was no fidget toys or anything at that stage. So our estimation of time that it takes to do tasks is vastly underrated. So taking those a few minutes in between is really important for a student that may have tendencies towards dysgraphia, so they don't completely tire out and they're not totally exhausted by the time that they finish. Practicing fine and motor skills, puzzles, building blocks, lots of fabulous online tools or YouTube videos, or so many amazing games now that have come out in recent years that help in this area. Again, for all age groups, we would have loads of our adults and our later teenagers doing some of these things, because they really help with, I suppose, your arm structure and your hands. And then we, as mentioned, obviously we have an online course that may work on in this area if people wanted some more tips and suggestions. Then at school, so for any maybe teachers or educators linking in, we do a lot of work in this space with some workshops, and we have found that, and this has been taken up a good bit more in an Irish context, particularly in primary schools, that I think there's more of an open-ended approach now anymore to alternative forms of homework. So do we always have to handwrite it? Maybe not. Can it be typed? Can they say it out loud and record it and send it to the teacher? During the pandemic, I think opened up that wave for change a little. Now it isn't fully cemented, let's say over here, might be a little different in the UK, but hopefully there's some element of growth there, that we're not as fixed as have to write your homework and you have to do all your tests written. Hopefully we are as a globe evolving a little bit away from that traditional mindset. Individual education plans, so IEPs, are really important over here. I'm not sure about a UK base, but getting access to an IEP can be really, really useful, and seeing then what are the handwriting tasks or tools or strategies that will be implemented. In terms of assistive technology, and we'll get to this a little bit more, but we find Dragon really useful, to be honest, in a sense, but there's obviously many of them. I've just put this one in here because we work with them quite a lot and would do a lot in that space of speech to text and text to speech software. I think in terms of kind of computer-based aspects for somebody that has dysgraphia, unless they have a real willingness and a real want to spend a huge amount of time either relearning how to hold a pen, or they really, really want to have handwriting, solid, strong capabilities, then it is good to do that approach, but maybe an integration of both. So a little bit of tech and then maybe a little bit of handwriting at the same time to have, it doesn't have to be all or one, we can have an overlap of both of them. And then specific instructions kind of goes without saying, I suppose. At college then, and at work, so at college, note-taking support can often just be invaluable, really. For me personally, I did, many, many years, and I'm still in some form of ongoing education, a little bit of an addict to learning both online and in person. And note-taking is such a fabulous tool, and if that isn't prevalent or evident, we'll get onto some tech that might help in that area. But having a student be able to sit in an environment where they can either absorb information or they can take their own shorthand notes, but knowing that somebody else is either typing or handwriting all of the notes for them can just make it so much easier. And more importantly, they can actually read them afterwards. So we would have loads of students that start off in university and they're like, no, I'm okay now. I did all my exams. So I'll be able to take loads of notes in a lecture. And then in a lecture theatre where there's 200-300 people and the lecture's talking 500 miles an hour and, was all the way so far ahead. So in terms of distance, we might not hear the year that they're saying, or we might not hear all the specifics. And then we're just kind of making it up as we're sitting down, and I've personally done that too. So it's very, very useful tool, and something if people are linking in, or if somebody has a student maybe moving into college, or if that was an area and that was interacting with our listeners, definitely is something to look at and see how that can help. Registering with disability support obviously would be very useful in academic support, and then as we mentioned, we have some of our study booklets as well if anybody wants some more suggestions in that area. Then at work, so for all of our adult educators and for anybody in this space that wants to learn a little bit more either for themselves or for somebody else they know, we find that the disclosure element, which I know today's topic isn't fully around disclosure and how to disclose, let's say, learning differences, and that depends upon workplace to workplace, but informing obviously somebody within the team or within the group can really help, I suppose, create that level of understanding a little bit. And it is, I feel, still kind of their obligation then to maybe create some form of an education, because there's an awful lot of people that don't know about dysgraphia or dyscalculia, or have maybe a limited little bit of understanding as to dyslexia. So it often is the role of the person with the learning difference to shed that light a little bit more. Creating reasonable accommodations and tech, and then communication methods. So we would have lots of adults that would come to us and they're moving through their day job, but they may go into a meeting with 12 or 13 managers and they may need to take notes, or they may get caught along the hallway and they're going off to lunch and they get told to do 2 or 3 tasks there when they go back to their desk, and they're trying to write things down on sticky notes, or they're trying to do things on the go, and then words get jumbled and they may come up with a completely new tasks that they were never given. So finding ways and means around those can be really, really useful and create more of an element of structure, but also more of an ease in a day-to-day role and work environment. Then the assistive technology that I've been pretty much, I think, speaking about all evening. Now, some of these will have an overlap. Some will be just our personally main top tips and suggestions around assistive tech. We find that some of these can be really, really useful depending upon what area or let's say event that we're coming at. read and write, so very, very useful tool to be installed onto a computer. Highlighting text can be really, really good for somebody with dysgraphia or with a learning difference, so we find that massively impactful. LiveScribe is probably one of the most essential tools, along with Dragon, that we would recommend and use with students or with adults with dysgraphia. So LiveScribe, I came across myself many years ago, and it was introduced, and I would have used it also in areas of my own work. And basically looks like a pen, so that's why I really love it, and that's why some of our adults that we work with really like it too, because it is very discreet and it is very under the radar, and we get a lot of assistive tech. You know, let's say that our software or hardware is a little bit invasive, you know, and stands out from the crowd, whereas this piece, they really obviously drafted it so that it really does look like a pen and feels like a pen, you know. So if you're in a meeting context or in a lecture theatre, obviously with the permission of other people, but it has the facility to record, you know, plug it into the computer, transcribes notes. It does an amazing array of things that just can ease that pressure of constant handwriting and constant trying to take everything down. As we've mentioned, Dragon, some few others that may not have a full overlap with dysgraphia, but we find really useful. Natural Reader, browser extensions. The Brain is a fabulous mind mapping tool software, and Photomap, and probably one of the last ones of Luminosity. We did a segment recently just showcasing that a little bit more. We've no major ties to them. Something I've used probably since I was about 10 or 11. I don't know how I ever came across it. There's both a free and a paid platform, but it's probably one of the most useful traditional, I suppose, maybe brain training tools that we've ever come across. And it has such fabulous, I suppose, games really in a sense, and puzzles. It is catered towards a later teenager and more importantly an adult demographic. So it has an awful lot of cognitive learning tools as we get older to keep our brain active and keep evolving and keep training it, which is vital for our brain development and functioning as proven by research. But I think that on an ongoing basis to send you 2 or 3 to do every single day has massively changed. We have some adults, a chap that is with us for many years, and he retired about 2 or 3 years ago, and every day he'll still click in and do his 2 or 3 puzzles from Luminosity, and just thinks it's probably one of the best things he's ever used. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that also. And we do have Dragon to give away because it's Dyslexia Awareness Month. So anybody either wants to put in their email or send us an email or go onto our social media, we do really highly recommend having a look at some of the software packages. Again, we've no major ties to any of them, but just, you know, if people are having ongoing issues, we feel that definitely assistive tech can help along that path as well. So an overview summary, I suppose, of dysgraphia. So we didn't actually fully look at a definition, but I look at it now, is what we feel. Now, again, this is totally open to debate. So there's various and millions of definitions for dysgraphia, dyslexia, everything and anything. So by no means is this a set in stone definition. And learning disability is something that will vastly be evolving and changing as to difference and difficulty and the wording around those things. But the main underlying principles of it is obviously difficulties with writing, handwriting, fine motor skills, and the effectiveness of written communication. So it's a written, let's say, base in terms of oral or oral. It isn't really proven to be impacted yet from those sensory aspects. It's mainly through written aspects. In terms of types, this is also evolving through research. My understanding is that there is a growing level on terms of categorizations as with other learning differences. And we like to find boxes to put things into, I think, to maybe make it a little bit easier. Whether that is the right or wrong approach is yet to be proven or discovered, but there definitely are growing numbers of overlaps and types. And as we mentioned, it is often very common to have dysgraphia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and have an overarching banner of learning differences. Cause of diagnosis methods, again, still very much up to debate. If I knew how to cure, or whatever the right word is for some of these things, I probably would have also done it myself at times, even though there's many strengths, but also there can be a huge amount of challenges, you know, so that's really important to highlight to people as well, that, you know, it's not ever an easy path, so it's something to not ever be taken lightly in a sense. But it can have a genetic overlap, and that has been proven through research that there may be genetic tendencies. However, obviously 20, 30, 40, even 50, 60 years ago, there may be no diagnostic tools or element of detection in a school basis. So just because somebody wasn't given a label doesn't mean that maybe there were tendencies or signs there initially. And then obviously accommodations and things that would help to improve it. Handwriting improvements then, so from an Irish basis, working with an OT and occupational therapist can improve or help with handwriting skills. We would have students that would be granted and would work with software and would work with a laptop in a school or in a workplace context, but they still may like to write bits and pieces. You know, it's just all about the pressure that is putting on the hand, and also how legible it is. At times I pick up, particularly now coming up to Christmas, I know it's a few weeks away, but you know, if we're writing handwriting cards, and I often get this notion of these will be great, and then I look back over them, I'm like, these are just so messy, and you know, maybe I'll get somebody else to do them this year. So there is a want usually there for a person to have maybe neater handwriting, or they want to be able to do it, but it just might not be fully plausible for them yet. So there's always a yet factor. Keyboard skills, so there's amazing a range of typing practices and platforms out there for all age groups, both younger students and for adults. We find these really good because they're just a little bit more engaging, in a sense of going on, type up your shopping list. Yes, you can do it that way too, but having a kind of a bit of a program or a path can really help improve skills. We find that particularly as well from a student age group, or you know, young adults that are moving maybe from school to college, where they're so used to handwriting and kind of being forced to handwrite in a sense, and now they're taking on computer skills a little bit more. It can be overwhelming, you know, it can take a lot of readjusting. We've been writing for X amount of years, and now you're given a completely new device, and here you go, and try and figure this out and try and learn now how to type. But we can never handwrite as fast as we will be able to learn how to type. So there is a lot of growth there, that if we can help people change their mindset a little from moving away from typing, or maybe from handwriting if they need to typing, then if you were 2 or 3 years down the line, they'd be like, oh, that's the best decision I ever did, you know, because we'll all often be able to make an awful lot more progress and get the thoughts onto a computer screen a lot easier. Mind mapping, as you mentioned, speech to text, and then obviously spell check and grammar tools, as we all obviously are probably aware of. Seeking support and self-advocacy. So we've touched on this a little bit throughout today's session, but the importance obviously of linking in and, you know, joining workshops like this and trying to, you know, tease things out a little bit more can be really, really useful and help people feel like they're not, you know, on their own. Yes, there isn't maybe a huge amount of posters and bits and pieces for different things, but that doesn't mean that, you know, we're all in isolation, you know. So joining, I think that may help improve both your level of knowledge, or maybe also will help somebody else, is very beneficial in our eyes. Mindset, obviously trying to have a bit more of an open perspective, and as we mentioned, there can be challenges, very much so, and it's not to ever move away from that, because we often create so much positivity around learning differences, but it's also not to undermine that, you know, on a day-to-day basis, if a student's at home or person's in a meeting and they have to write loads of notes, that can be difficult. You know, it's important to emphasize that too, that it's never an easy path, but there are ways around it that would hopefully make it a little bit easier. and resources, educational resources and assistive technology, and obviously through fabulous advocacy networks and ANND here this evening, and SWD and lots of other organisations both in the UK and even internationally. You know, it's really great to link into, you know, other countries, seeing what they're doing and seeing what other tips and suggestions might be involved in that space may be impactful also for you. As you mentioned about our programme, and more importantly with some of our booklets for Dyslexia Awareness Month, also on some of our social media, if anybody wanted to gain any further top tips and suggestions, we'd be delighted to link in. I know we're doing a Q&A session towards the end, and we obviously have a host of classes that we'll run both online and in person as well for students of all age groups really. If anybody has any personal questions that they don't want to maybe share in a public setting, let's say, please feel free to get on to us, or else obviously we're happy to take any questions at the end of today's segment. So I'll stop sharing my slides. Hopefully you're all still with me.
Thank you, Una. That was brilliant. I was making lots of notes while you were chatting. Really insightful. Just on a very practical level, because we do get asked this, if folks want those slides, you're happy if they email you, Una, for a copy?
No problem.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I know it's a real mundane question, but it's often a really important one that we always get asked, so that's brilliant. So, you know, you talked about looking across borders into different territories and so on, right at the end there about links. And we know, for whatever reason, we have this debate around dysgraphia, depending on the territory, the country that we belong to. And for that reason, we wanted to give a platform to this learning difference, because it's often one that folks don't know a lot about. There's lots of misunderstandings, and actually quite different depending on the countries and so on that you live in. So with that in mind, Sue, may I come to you just to give us a sense of where we're at in England and Wales in terms of identifying this learning difference?
Okay, well, first of all, I thought it was really interesting what Una had to say. It's quite a lot, you know, we don't disagree with. It's really good, and to have it all there in front of us was excellent. The only thing for us is that we define dysgraphia as a handwriting difficulty, and you define it as more than that. And it looks to me like you have the American definition there. And in the first sentence in your summary, I think it would be nice to start with that, actually, to see what we were actually talking about. You included writing, and I think that is the big difference. We don't talk about expressing ourselves in writing when we define dysgraphia. I think yours is a whole lot more. We're just talking about the physical side, and we as assessors, qualified assessors, don't diagnose dysgraphia. So it'd be interesting to know how you assess. I mean, you mentioned occupational therapists, but we use pediatric therapists or occupational therapists. We don't do it ourselves, but what else are you assessing then, if you're assessing more than just the physical side of handwriting? And also, there was one thing I didn't know what the meaning of it was phonological dysgraphia. Can you tell me what that is? Maybe you know, Katrina.
Yeah, just to make sure that we don't have a debate around Una's presentation in that way, can we just clarify for our listeners where we're at in England and Wales then, Sue and Katrina? For those who are listening about wanting for their children to be identified, and maybe adults listening who are living with this difference, where are we at in terms of who do people go to if they live in England and Wales, they think they have dysgraphia? Who do they go to in terms of seeking some support and help?
Well, I think first of all, we need to establish what they believe dysgraphia is, because people do ring us and ask for an assessment for dysgraphia, and it's not what it is.
I think, I mean, a lot of these terms are bandied about, aren't they? It's like dyscalculia, you know, how do we know it's dyscalculia or difficulties with maths in dyslexia? And so there is this umbrella, isn't there, of specific learning difficulties. And as you said, you know, there's so many different variations of these things, aren't there, that, you know, clearly there might well be medical difficulties there that need to be sorted out by an occupational therapist, but there may also be missing things there that aren't picked up.
Yeah.
So we always look at the child, the whole child, don't we, in a very holistic way, and lots of different things in that child's makeup, not just writing, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. And this is why we wanted to discuss this, because it's tricky, isn't it? It really is. And you know, Sue, you've asked some really interesting questions there. I don't know if this is on this broadcast is the one to unpick it, but yeah, it's really interesting. It shows us that this is an ongoing conversation where there could be quite a lot of confusion around this. On that note, then, you know, I guess what we would share is that for those of you who are listening, who've come to this session to find out more for yourself as an adult, for your children, depending on where in the world you're listening, yes, there's maybe different journeys and different information. You know, Sue had highlighted that Una shared some really interesting, you know, reputable information around dysgraphia this evening, which we're so grateful for. Thank you, Una. Which actually maybe is slightly different than what other parts of the world may consider dysgraphia to be. And this is why we wanted to have this session, to try and have those conversations, because they're quite, you know, yeah, they leave some of us in quite a bit of a muddle if we're not experts in that way.
Yeah.
And that's why then, as I'm going to try and share the technology as we say goodbye on the recorded part of this evening, that's why we work together as a coalition. And that's why we really do hope that people will reach out to find out more. So as Una's kindly said, that you can reach out to her to get the slides. And I'm just going to tee up, this is the bit I absolutely hate, in terms of trying to, let me try and sort out my tech. It's gone glitchy. There it is. So hopefully you guys can see this. These are the contact details to reach out to the organisations as part of the ANND coalition in terms of wanting to find out more. So as Una said, you can kindly reach out to her. She shared her email address on the broadcast this evening for the slides. They are really useful. But if you'd like some more information, please do reach out to Succeed, to the Adult Dyslexia Centre, to Hampshire and to Yorkshire Rose as well. But yes, this is a really interesting conversation. So thank you, everyone. I will stop the recording now. And for those who are with us live, we'll take any questions. Please do keep in touch with us. And again, a huge thank you, Una. That was absolutely fascinating. And it shows that this really sparks a debate, doesn't it, around this learning difference. It can be maybe controversial in some ways. So on that note, please keep in touch. I'm going to stop the recording now.